Okay, thank you. Okay, so I understand we are live on YouTube, is that right, Aubrey? We're streaming. So a warm welcome from myself, Max McLean, Chairman here at Bradford Teaching Hospitals Trust. My role as Chairman is to lead the Board of Directors and the Council of Governors and to make the best job we can of doing properly and protecting people here in Bradford. This is our first AGM live stream, so welcome to that. As people who are joining us, and I can see there are those, you will know we're on YouTube. And of course, it's important for transparency that there's an annual general meeting. It's a requirement of our constitution to present our annual report and accounts. I do want to begin as chairman on a note of sincere thanks to all staff. It's been an incredible and unprecedented period, and staff have redeployed. The clinical excellence that we've seen in Bradford has clearly saved lives. And of course, we know we've lost colleagues, both to COVID and other conditions. And, you know, we mourn their recent loss. I do want to pay particular tribute to two colleagues in service who have passed away due to COVID-19 in this recent period. So to the families of Christine Senior, a midwife with us, and Mohammed Desai, cleaning assistant, we obviously mourn their loss, and may they rest in peace. Now, we're a good organisation. The CQC have come here during the course of this year, and in April decided we're a good organisation according to our regulator. It's the first time we've achieved that good rating under the current regime. And we know indeed there are pockets of outstanding practice and care. So let's build on that. The year under review that we're doing now, 2019-20, has seen the appointment of our new Chief Executive Officer, Professor Mel Pickup. And she's clearly hit the ground running. She'll take us to that outstanding level of service as we move through this year and the coming years. And we'll be hearing from Mel first tonight. 2020 will also see further changes to our executive team. So we thank Sandra Shannon, Cindy Fidel, and Brian Gill, particularly for their service to Bradford. And in due course, we'll be welcoming their replacements as we move ahead. So a very warm welcome to an important meeting. The agenda, for those who have seen a copy of it, we'll be hearing from Mel, our CEO, regarding the presentation of the annual report. We will hear from Matthew, our Director of Finance, who will present the annual accounts. And we'll hear from two of our governors regarding the work of the governors during the course of the year and the way in which they've held our non-executive team on the board to account. I can also confirm that we have received some questions from the public, and we are ready to answer all of those questions received, which we will do tonight. I'm then looking forward to hearing from Deborah Horner, one of our intensive care consultants, who's been a key player in our response to COVID, and she'll be talking to us about our clinical response. We then finish with a video for your enjoyment regarding the work that's been done and the achievements that we feel we've made here at this hospital during the course of the year. We should close hopefully by 7 o'clock if we get things done on time. Again, it's important as chairman, I give you a warm welcome here and start by bringing Mel up to the table. There are some formalities I should do to check that the minutes of the previous meeting held on 17th of October 2019 are an accurate record. I will look at the people present to determine whether we've either had any notification there's any problems with those or whether there's any matters of inaccuracy. And I see none of those. So we formally accept the minutes of the previous meeting held in October 2019. So again, warm welcome, and I will now pass you to Mel, our CEO, who's going to present the annual report.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome everybody to what is my very first annual members meeting. So the year that we are talking about, as Max has alluded to, was essentially a game of two halves from the point of view of the leadership of the organisation. I came and joined the trust in November, and at this point I would love to say a huge thank you to everybody across the organisation, and indeed partners and members of our community who have made that landing in this new organisation and indeed a new place to live for me incredibly easy. I've been made to feel so welcome and settled right in, which is a good job really, because things got pretty busy quickly in that particular period. And as with all these things, what we're going to share with you tonight is some words and some figures, and by necessity, all of those are in the mix. So let's start with some figures and our year in numbers. Well, we serve a very diverse population, as you will appreciate, of well over 500,000 people. And in order to provide care to those individuals, we are funded to the tune of £450 million. Much of that expenditure is related to paying our staff. Probably 70 to 75% of what we spend goes towards the salaries of the people who are Team Bradford Teaching Hospitals, and they are some 6,000 plus in number. And what they do throughout the year is they provide care to those 500,000 plus members of our community in the shape of outpatient appointments. So nigh on 500,000 of those. Some new members to our community, well over 5,000 new babies who joined the population of Bradford. We performed about 132,000 elective operations, and we are supported in our endeavours not just by the board and the executive team and the whole management team, indeed the organisation, but we have out there in our community other people who support us, and there are Foundation Trust members, of which there are 48,000. And it would be, as Chairman's already alluded to, slightly odd if we were not to mention once again the impact that COVID-19 has had, albeit it was the close of the financial year. So essentially it was the last month of the year that we're talking about tonight, but it was the first month in which COVID really became a very harsh reality to us all in this organisation. So we saw the largest single transformation to the NHS, and our dedicated and courageous staff responded absolutely brilliantly to the emerging COVID-19 crisis. And I look forward actually to you hearing from Deborah Horner about just what that means. It's very easy for me to say we responded and we rose to the challenge, but when you hear from Deborah, and indeed when you see some of the images that will be contained in the video later, you will get a deeper understanding of just what that means to us in this organisation. And services deemed non-critical at that point have faced quite a lot of disruption, and indeed some of the performance that lots of us in the organisation, and I'm looking at Sandra as the Chief Operating Officer, who lives and breathes the delivery of constitutional targets, has worked incessantly over the last few years to get ahead of the game on, has had to watch as that performance as we get into the period of COVID start to deteriorate somewhat, because quite rightly and properly our attention turned not to those patients who could wait, but to those patients who could not wait, and more of that. We've already heard from Max that we were rated by the CQC as good, which was a phenomenal achievement for the organisation and marked well over 2 years worth of intense improvement and development work to take us as an organisation from that position of requires improvement to a good, and not just a good, a very, very strong good. And it provides a fantastic platform for our forward aspirations to become an outstanding organisation as soon as that opportunity. Not that anybody will put their hands up to offer themselves up to be inspected, but when the time is right, we will be ready for that and we shall embrace that. So it was fantastic. They did their unannounced inspection in November. They reported on some brilliant examples of innovation, some of which I'm going to talk about in the next few slides, and highlighted examples of really outstanding practice. And when the report was published in April, it would have, under ordinary circumstances, been much cause for celebration. But as it was, we were well into the throes of COVID, and it was pretty low key. Because by necessity there was more important work to do. But when the time is right, we are looking forward to celebrating that in the most appropriate way. So some of those highlights then, what did that particular year, 1920, hold for us? Well, in this building, in this very auditorium, we celebrated the official opening of our command centre, which is the first in Europe powered by artificial intelligence. Now, this is employing groundbreaking digital technology, and it enables us, and has been incredibly powerful throughout the COVID crisis, in providing a focal point for our senior leaders to make real-time operational decisions without the need for wandering the corridors and intruding into clinical areas to gather information. So it's been a real asset, and indeed is something that we have developed not just a national reputation for, but indeed across Europe and international reputation for. We've used technology elsewhere, of course, groundbreaking technology in our diabetes ward, so 50 of our patients become the first in the NHS to benefit from new glucose reading equipment. We broke new ground with the appointment of a clinician, Dr. Tom Lawton, as our head of artificial intelligence. And that's really important and very symbolic, because it is absolutely right and proper that digital be led by clinicians. They are the tools of our clinicians, and that's the culture and the ethos that we are approaching digital with. It does not exist for the sake of digital. It's not a bright and shiny gadget thing that everybody can look at and applaud. If it doesn't do the business for us, and that means freeing up clinical time and creating more space for our clinicians to provide the best treatment and care that they can, then we're really not interested in it. We also teamed up with Accessible UK to launch new online accessibility guides to all our hospitals to help all those patients of ours across our communities who have disabilities and need that extra support. We took a pledge for equality. We launched the new NHS Rainbow Badges in our trust, promoting inclusivity and reducing health inequalities for LGBT plus people in them accessing healthcare and in the way that they experience healthcare. And we also opened our new Wilson Centre for Applied Research. And this has really come into its own during the COVID period, where it has become almost the nerve centre of the clinical advisory group advising the local authority and our Gold Command about the evidence base and the population health information emerging out of COVID. But it's also supporting the work that has been built up over a number of years and was already there in terms of Born in Bradford. So the work that we do with children, the work that we do in providing real state-of-the-art elderly care has all been promulgated by virtue of having the Bradford Institute on our site, augmented now by the partnership that's represented by the Wilson Centre. We got the stamp of approval for our intensive care unit. The team was praised in external audit for its excellent teamwork. This was way before COVID ever happened. If there was ever going to be awards for teamwork, then critical care, and in particular our two respiratory wards, were the absolute embodiment of that from March onwards. We opened the butterfly pathway and the butterfly room, which is a beautiful bespoke area for families who are undergoing the most traumatic and life-changing events with their children who have life-limited conditions. A real sanctuary and haven for those families at that particular time. And our cardiac rehab team secured national accreditation for the outstanding service it delivers to patients to help them get back onto their feet after a heart attack. That means getting back into their lives, back into their families, and back into their work situation. Some of our work has been externally validated by us winning national awards. So here are a few of those. A programme involving BTH to drive forward improvements for patients who have had hip and knee surgery was the subject of a HSJ Patient Safety Award, and we were crowned Infection Prevention Control Initiative of the Year in that, which was a great achievement. Our informatics team was named Team of the Year at the prestigious Digital Health Awards, playing a key role in EPR, which is electronic patient records, and indeed Command Centre, about which I've spoken. And our resourceful, flexible workforce team was crowned the National Workforce Planning Team of the Year in our Health Heroes Award. So a little now about some more numbers, they're the words. And I want to talk a little bit about our performance through 1920. And there are four key areas constitutionally that we are measured continually upon. The emergency care standard, that's being seen, treated, admitted or discharged through accident emergency within 4 hours. Referral to treatment, waiting time, so that should be from start to finish. Referral to treatment, no longer than 18 weeks. Cancer waiting times, so those are things like 2-week referral, 30-day pathway, 62-day pathway, and routine diagnostic services. So the speed at which we can deliver those tests that patients need so critically. Let's start with emergency care, which has been a real challenge to us over recent years, with ever increasing reliance on A&E as the front door to the hospital in a system in which there is a lot of illness and a lot of urgent care that manifests. So it has been a challenging year, but you will see there that our performance began to improve in December 19, and happily I can report that we are continuing to hold our own in that particular area. And that really has been on the back of us utilising, COVID has been a terrible thing that nobody would have wanted, but it's possible to take some good out of it. There are ways of working that helped us in COVID that we have continued to uphold, and that is giving us some benefits in providing different models of emergency care. In terms of our referral to treatment time, you can see there the blue line with the dots on is our performance and the red line is the England average. So we have consistently performed very well in this particular area, but you can see towards the end of February, March, that start to decline, and that's because that was the period in which we were stopping all our elective work and some of our outpatient work in order to concentrate on providing and preparing for COVID patients. Our cancer 2-week wait, traditionally a very high performer in this area. You can see the national average, and you can see that we have always, or for some considerable time throughout the year, managed to achieve that, and indeed helped in no small part by a reduction in the number of referrals that were coming through towards the latter end of the financial year. Because of COVID, we've been able to impressive improvements that we have taken on board through the COVID period that we are now translating into routine practice for expediting those patient interactions very early on in that pathway using digital amongst other things. All this, of course, in the context up until COVID of increasing demand and increasing numbers of referrals. Routine diagnostics, again, performing consistently above the national average and maintaining that seen within 6 weeks target of above 95%. And specific improvements in radiology have been sustained throughout the year. So a very positive year, I guess, up to a certain point in it, just the last month of it, where things really started to change and our focus changed. Our priorities for improvement come out of the things that we have learned within that year. So whether they come as a result of conversations with our governors, on the back of patient feedback, what the CQC have found, what our commissioners want and expect. We like to focus on a number of very clear areas for improvement in one year, and this year is no exception. Management of deteriorating patients is a key focus. Patient experience, and in particular, when I say patient experience, I'm referring to our kindness campaign and our desire to always demonstrate kindness in our interactions with patients and their families, and a real focus on the continued reduction in stillbirths. So that really rounds off what I want to say at this point. Of course, there will be the opportunity for questions later. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mel, and thank you as our new CEO during this period for all the energy and focus that you've brought to this organisation. So thank you, thanks very much. Yeah. Okay, so we're now going to hear, it's a strange environment this, because we're in our wonderful Sovereign Lecture Theatre here, and of course there's just a handful full of people looking at me, which normally this would be a very full meeting for the AGM. So I hope we're coming through clearly to you on YouTube and that you can hear everything we're saying. We're now going to hear from our Director of Finance, Matthew Horner, who brings the other part of the constitutional requirement to this meeting to present our annual accounts for that period. Thank you, Matthew.
So good evening, everyone. So I'm Matthew Horner, I'm the Finance Director for the Trust, and it's my duty to present the annual accounts for 2019-20 to the Council of Governors at this annual members meeting. And it's actually the 9th time I've done this for the Trust. But once again, I'm really pleased to be able to report that the Foundation Trust met its financial metrics for the year. Quick overview then is, firstly, we met our planned control total for the year. We spent nearly £12 million on capital in terms of buildings, equipment and digital progress. I'll come on to that. We had an unqualified or unmodified auditor's opinion from our external auditor Deloitte. As we've already alluded to in terms of the CQC assessment, the use of resourcing rating was also good, and I'll come on to that. And we invested significantly in our charitable fund events and activities. So for the year, the control total regime continued throughout 1920, which was introduced in 2016-17, which meant if you met your targeted overall financial target issued by NHSEI, or England and Improvement, you had the opportunity to generate quite a sizable amount of provider sustainability fund. So our target for the start of the year was a deficit of 12.8 million. And if we delivered that, we would receive broadly a similar amount to bring us back to a break-even position. You will note on the table that we generated income of around about £430 million, but when you added back the provider sustainability income at the bottom, that brings us to the £450 million that Mel alluded to earlier. We spent around 440 million on operating expenditure and 5 on other elements of expenditure. which brought us to a deficit of around about 13.9 million, which from a regulatory perspective was considered to deliver our target due to a few technical adjustments. And when we take into account the additional income we got from the Provide Sustainability Fund, it produced an overall surplus of around about 5.5 million. The majority of that surplus is a technical adjustment. So from a regulatory perspective and for the Council of Governors, our overall position was around about a break-even position for the year ending 31st of March 2020. Once again, this is an excellent performance for the organisation, and not only does it set us a really good foundation for the forthcoming years, but it also enables us to report the best risk rating that can be afforded when we are going through the regulator's overall financial risk rating framework. Again, a really pleasing result, particularly when you think about the financial challenges we face, the economic environment that we're currently working in, the challenges we face to manage demand, appoint the staff, and also our really good ambition, strong ambitions to improve quality and safety of our services to the populations that we provide. I'll probably provide a few slides that you normally see at this, just in terms of taking you through the income and the expenditure. But overall, we generated £450 million of income for the year, 80% of that being provided to the population of Bradford and Airedale, and the vast majority of that charged to our Bradford Airedale commissioning organisations. Interestingly, for 2019-20, we moved away from the historical contractual arrangements that we had, where we were basically paid for the activity that we delivered on an item-by-item basis, into a fixed income contract arrangement, where we set the value at the start of the year to allow us to focus more on working as a system and how does the Bradford healthcare system spend the best it can for the Bradford pound that's coming in. And that moved away from all technical challenges around the contract and so on. So much more of a focus on how do we best invest in the clinical services that we provide to the population of Bradford and Airedale. Other operating income equates to around about £52 million, but the two sizable amounts in there cover our two really successful, we're really successful in terms of education and training, where we generated around about £20 million of income, and our research institute, which is currently generating around about £13 million of income. So quite some sizable amounts of income from some of our other activities coming through. The pie chart in front of you just provides a breakdown of the income that we generated in 2019-20, with the dark red block covering the non-elected income, which equated to around about £111 million for the year, about 25% of our income, and that covers the patients that turn up through A&E or are admitted directly into our hospital. Our elective income, which was on one of the slides that Mel alluded to over 100,000 patients, we generated somewhere in the region of £50 million this year, around 11% of our income. Outpatients equates to 14%, and the other sizable segment on there is our other NHS income, which covers things like adult critical care, neonatal, renal services, community services, and our diagnostic and therapy services. So that covers the lion's share of the income that we generate as a trust. If we move on to expenditure, we incurred, as we mentioned earlier, about £440 million worth of expenditure, about £1.2 million a day, and over 2/3 of that is on our staff in terms of the salaries and wages that we pay. When we turn to non-pay expenditure, that covers things like our drugs, our clinical supplies, and the services we need to keep the hospital running, and I'll come on to that later on in the presentation. And finally, depreciation, which is basically the costs we incur to manage our assets, is around about £10.3 million, and that's the money we generate each year to reinvest back into our estate to support the ongoing clinical care of the organisation. So similar to the income model, we've got an expenditure breakdown, and the key segments there, as you can see, relate very much to our pay bill, with 19% expended on medical staff pay, which is around about £84 million, 18% similarly on the nursing, qualified nursing and midwives, and then around about £16 million on some of our other areas of clinical staff. Drugs accounted for around about £41 million in 2019-20. That's an area that continues to rise in cost. Clinical supplies, around about 10% of our total outgoings, in the region of £43 million, and then the other brackets, the other segments, relate to basically estate facilities costs, maintenance, and our infrastructure costs. As I mentioned on the initial slide, we spent nearly £12 million on our capital throughout the year, with £5 million on new developments and a sizable proportion of that being our investment into Ward 22, our cardiology ward. We've already mentioned the command centre. That was a key element of our capital programme for the year, and we also spent around about £3 million on replacing some of our critical medical equipment. So in total, over the last 5 years, we're now at somewhere in the region of about a £95 million investment into capital, 49 million on new developments, 30 million on IT infrastructure, and that's covered mainly our EPR and the command centre, and £8 million onto new medical equipment. So it's really demonstrating how we're using our savings that we generate each year and really investing it back into frontline clinical care. Our programme this year is probably double what we spent last year, around about £23 million, but we are continuing to look to source additional funding to help us prepare should the trust face a second wave of COVID. So we're having various discussions with the centre around where we could improve our services from a capital investment perspective. It's my duty to highlight the independent audit opinion to the Council of Governors. And each year, our independent auditors, who are currently Deloitte, they review the financial statements to ensure they represent a true and fair view of the overall position, but have been prepared in accordance with the Department of Health's group accounting manual. And I'm pleased to be able to report that once again, our external auditors have provided unmodified audit opinion on the financial statements. And in addition, they also reviewed a number of other key documents, and I have no issues that I need to raise with the Council of Governors here today. And as in previous years, Deloitte will no doubt attend an upcoming Council of Governors meeting to summarise their work that they carried out for their external audit. We've already mentioned the CQC rating a few times, but just to bring attention to the use of resourcing good rating, where it's really pleasing to actually report that it was a good rating for the year. The inspections make an assessment of how productive the trust is using its resources to provide high quality and sustainable care for patients. And they explored a range of key lines of inquiry, and when they awarded our good rating, they commented positively on our financial performance, our embedded approach to quality improvement, and our strong collaborative working across the system. The one element that they look at is what they call the weighted average unit, or a WOW. And it's basically an assessment of how you compare from a productivity and efficiency perspective to other acute providers. And there are 3 lines on here. The dark blue line is how our weighted activity unit value has changed over recent years. The orange line is the national position, and the blue line is our peers. And as you can see, we've year on year improved what you could consider to be our relative efficiency compared to both peers and the national picture. And for 2018, we reported a position that our weighted activity unit cost was 3,267, which is quite significantly below the national average. And it's a really positive figure to present. If we just move on to the hospital's charity, I'll provide a brief overview of what we do, with the sole purpose being to invest in services and in particular enhance the services that we provide. It allows staff to identify large and small valuable differences that the charity can support to deliver real benefits to both patients and staff. We've included a few pictures on here, the one at the bottom right hand corner being the charity football event that we held that day. And just to point out that the 2 celebrities were muscled into the middle by Sam Dingle. Don't quite know how that happened, but there you go. So it was a really, really enjoyable day. So just moving on, sorry, I missed out there. So you can see on the slide that our overall fund value is around about £2 million. We raised around about £400,000 and spent around about £500,000. And we'll come on to where some of those generous donations were allocated. So we can see on here, of the £500,000 that we spent on patient facilities, enhancing medical equipment and supporting our staff. And in terms of just a few of the details, we redecorated patient rooms on Ward 24, making them more warm, relaxing and improving patient facilities. We upgraded 8 chemotherapy chairs in oncology to the top of the range models, providing more comfort to the patients who can be in chairs for up to 9 hours a day, potentially 3 times a week. We installed relax and view screens in our CT scanner for children, which plays films and videos for children while they have a CT scan, helping improve the care of the 55 children that we scan on a daily basis. Another example is where we've had enhanced our replacement ultrasounds and provided treatment vests which treat chronic lung disease for children. The high-frequency chest wall oscillation vest performs a gentle form of therapy and reduces treatment time from an hour to 10 minutes. So some really good examples of how we enhance the services, improve the patient experience. 2019-20 saw the launch of our first fundraising appeal, the Raise a Smile appeal, which was targeting to raise £250,000, and that was to help radiology develop a more child-friendly service, providing safe spaces, distraction toys, friendly decor, and creating a snuggle room for the children and their parents. It was a key thing throughout the year in terms of our charity events, and we continue to participate in the Dragon Boat event. I've already mentioned the charity football match, but we had a superhero abseil, and we also had the skydiving event. It's really pleasing to say that now that has now concluded and it raised its full expected value. So we're now trying to build on that really positive feel in terms of how we might expand this into new areas of appeals. So to finish off, a few of you may remember that a couple of years ago, I brought along, when it was the 70th anniversary of the NHS, the ledger that we found in our archives. And we had, it was the most neatly written 1948 document you could possibly imagine, but there was very much at that time a focus on the clinical services. But I thought I'd put a different spin on it this time and just have a look at some of the non-clinical services. So when we look at the annual spend, which is in pounds, shillings and pence, it's probably only Max remembers that in this room, you can see that we spent £14,000 on renewals, repairs, building and crockery. The most interesting one for me was the cleaning and chandlery equipment. I had to actually Google what chandlery was, and it's candles. But what we've then done is we've taken that forward and changed the 1948 prices into 2020 prices. So, for example, in 1948, we spent £1,382 on electricity. If you converted that into this year's prices, it would be around about £50,000. We actually spent about £1.8 million on electricity this year. So there's been a sizable shift in some of the costs we're reporting. It's just a really, I mean, it's a fascinating ledger for me personally. It's fascinating to look at it. But clearly, Max, the way forward is candles and coal. We really want to save a lot of money going forward. Might struggle with the risk assessment, but we'll give it a go. So anyway, just a different way to conclude the finance presentation in terms of this year's account. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed, Matthew. Smashing. Okay, so I should actually repeat Matthew's thanks, shouldn't I, in terms of the £400,000 that was raised from the people of Bradford, the businesses of Bradford, for this hospital's charity during that period. So from us, sincere thanks, and you're making a difference, as you could see from what Matthew presented. So thank you very much. We're a foundation trust, and we're proud to be a foundation trust, and you've heard that we've over 40,000 members of this trust. But the most important people in a foundation trust are our governors. They hold the non-executive body of the board to account. They give us wise steer, and of course they represent the public, our partners and staff. And tonight we're going to hear, or this afternoon we're going to hear from our Vice Chair of Governors, Mr. David Wilmshurst, and Miss Pauline Garnett, who is a staff governor. And they're just going to bring to our attention the membership and governor's report for that period. So thank you, David and Pauline.
Hello. So you'll find full details about the members of the Council of Governors, the duties that we fulfil, and also the activities that we've undertaken in the annual report and also in the packs available, publicising this meeting. But firstly, we must say congratulations to all the staff on achieving the good rating. That's brilliant. So that's wonderful. And I'm sure that you won't want to stay there, you want to go further. So just keep your eyes pressing on, and we know that you'll be able to achieve excellent and outstanding. So we're just looking forward to see what's going to go on in the next chapter.
Hi. This year, as a Council of Governors, we feel that we've taken a really significant step forward in one of the main responsibilities that Max mentioned. That's holding the non-execs to account for the performance of the board. As a Council of Governors, we need to be satisfied that, for example, if trust performance in a particular area is below standard, the NEDs get a proper explanation from the executives about the reasons for it and what they're going to do about correcting the problem. In the past, we found this very difficult because we could only see the NEDs in action in our council meetings, in the open board meetings, and in private meetings we have with the NEDs before each council meeting. From attending these meetings, it was clear that the really substantive discussions took place in the committees of the board and in the closed sessions of the board, neither of which we were able to attend. Now, as you know, Max took up the role of chair in the middle of last year. When we asked him about attending committee meetings, he readily agreed that for us to be able to carry out our role effectively, we should be able to do so. So thanks very much for that, Max. Various governors started to observe the committee meetings in October, but then the emergence of coronavirus meant that this came to an end in March. The board meetings have continued to be held virtually during the pandemic, as has the Council of Governors, but the committees haven't been held in the same way. But whilst the Trust has ensured that essential business has been covered, over the summer, attention has been given to restructuring the boards and committees to support the development of a lighter touch bureaucracy. This is all in the spirit of reducing an excessive reporting culture and replacing it with a more streamlined decision-making model. The role of governors within this new governance structure is also being considered, and we'll be keen to work with Max to continue our role of observing the board and the delivery of the Trust's strategic objectives. The NEDs have been very supportive in welcoming us to meetings, and the relationships have continued to strengthen with the quarterly private meetings that we hold together. Now, whilst it's too early just now to give a view on the NED responsibility for the performance of the board, we'd hope to be able to do so this time next year. And we'd also be able to give more informed input when we're asked to provide commentary on individual NEDs for their annual appraisals. During the pandemic, governors have been kept up to date with the situation in the Trust, getting the latest figures for new cases and numbers of patients being treated and so on. And in contrast to a number of trusts, we've continued to hold our Council of Governors meetings and been able to carry out our responsibilities.
Other key activities, you might think, well, what else have we done? Well, in September, we appointed Julie Lorineau and Mohammed Hussain, the new NEDs. And Julie also took up the role of the chair of the Finance and Performance Committee. And these appointments followed a rigorous recruitment process, coordinated by the Governors, Nominations and Remuneration Committee. The interview process also included governors and also stakeholders. So we've just concluded now and had our interview process today for the replacement of Amjad Pervez, who with regret stepped down due to other commitments, yet international commitments. So we expect to announce over the next few weeks our next appointment for the new NED. And we'd really like to take this opportunity to thank Amjad for really all the work that he's done. We really appreciate the wonderful work that he's done over the past few years. So we've also approved the appointment of Mel Pickup as our new Chief Executive and Max as well, and they've certainly had a baptism of fire. So other key activities, another significant appointment is about, as Council is also thinking about the external auditor. So this year, following another rigorous process, we reappointed Deloitte, and thanks to the Trust corporate governance and procurement teams for their help and their guidance in helping the governors and also the NEDs and the executive to get involved in the appointment on the straight and narrow. So we're looking at other activities now. Another part that the governors are involved in is each month a different governor would also join the judging panel and for the trust team of the year. And this is just one of the ways where we really can see about what's actually going on, and happening on the ground, and also to see some of the wonderful work that's been performed, and also to see about staff and teams that are going above and beyond. So another thing that we look at is a group of governors get together each year and we just look at the performance indicator, and from somewhere in the trust to be audited by the external auditors as part of the annual quality report. So the performance indicators are commonly used across the health and also the care system, just to examine, just to compare performance and just to see, look around a range of different areas. So this year the governors chose the percentage of patients seen within 2 weeks of an urgent GP referral for suspected cancer. So this indicator was chosen because in 2018 to 2019, the trust was performing significantly below target. So as a result, we thought we might look at putting some improvement plans in place to see whether this would actually make a difference. So by January 2019, the target was it was 60%, they were like way below. But by October 2019, it actually increased by 96%. So that was a huge improvement. So given those improvements, we thought it was really necessary just to check to make sure that it was being reported accurately. But whilst the outcome of the audit is not really required for the quality account, we thought it's just really good just to get an idea and just to see, how it's actually been achieved, and just for us to actually look and see the journey that's actually been taken. So they've done really well from 60% up to 96%. So looking at other activities, we joined a group as well just to look at the long-term membership plan as well, because this is a way that we really want to make sure that we're actually reflecting the population and that the membership is actually being collaborative and getting involved. So this is one way that we try to look at. But as a result of the pandemic, it's just taken a stop at the moment. But we're hoping that we will reconvene soon and just to try and get the members and to get them involved to say about what their needs are. So this is something that we need to look at, and we're hoping to continue with the work very shortly. As a result of that, we've also produced an e-member bulletin, and that's been just to update members about the situation with COVID, just to also give them some useful key pieces of information. And overall, the feedback has been very positive. So also another area we want to look at that as staff governors, we want to make sure that we're strengthening our connections, to be engaging and to also to increase our visibility. And so at the moment now, we're trying to encourage staff to share their views about what they see in the trust, the direction, the vision, and also to let us know how, the trust is performing. So we're looking at the moment to look at notice board being displayed across the trust. We're trying to look at regular updates featured in the trust internal staff magazine, the Let's Talk, and also hearing from key staff about key development and also about what affects them and what we can do as a trust to improve, and also to think about outstanding to go in that direction.
So this brings us to the membership of the Council of Governors. As we said earlier on, full details of the membership is available in the pack on the website. We'd like to name check the new members of the council this year. So that's Kirsch Siddiq, Helen Wilson, Amit Bhagwat, Mark Chambers, Ruth Wood, Kavitha Nadasalangam, and Dermot Bolton. The council consists of a mix of elected public governors, staff governors, and governors representing Bradford Council and Bradford and Leeds universities.
So this is just showing, really just thinking about our membership and our public involvement. We're really pleased in the last year to meet with our communities, our visitors, patients and staff in various events really during the last year. And some of them involve at the Green Spaces, the Healthy Places Festival, and that was held in July. The Trust delivered its first annual joint community fun day event with the Well Bradford initiative. Last year, there's also the annual members meeting, the annual general meeting a year ago, where the keynote presentation was delivered by Karen Dover, our chief nurse, and she provided the details about the patient experience strategy and the significance of actually getting patient stories involved and to be heard by the board in order to make some improvement and to find out about their experiences. So on that day as well, we also celebrate showcasing the amount of work that was being displayed and being carried out throughout the hospital trust, look at the various clinical departments, and also see some of the successes that's been taking place over the past 12 months. So this was an opportunity for visitors to actually engage with the trust staff, the governors, and also the directors. And in December, that was the World Cafe, and that was the first one that was held, which was the Learning Matters. And that went down very well. It was very popular. And so from this, we launched the first Learning Matters Awards, and that was voted by staff and visitors. And the awards were themed around the Care Quality Commission domains of safe, effective, caring, responsive, and well-led. And it was handed out at our Council of Governors meeting in January 2019. These awards were presented in memory of the son of Mr. Umran, who was a special guest at the ceremony. So these are the standouts of the year with regard to our key engagement with our members and the public. And our members have also continued to be involved in a very important patient-led assessment of the care environment known as PLACE. And we're encouraging any volunteers who are interested just to register. So we would like to say, firstly, a big thank you to our members and our communities. So many families here and across the country have, of course, gone through the pain of losing loved ones without even being able to be with them. And we know that must be just such a shame. We just can't really imagine what it's like. So our sympathy goes out to all of them. But also, we would also like to think about all those that did not attend A&E. Even in the past, they might have, but by doing so, they really helped the A&E, that they weren't overwhelmed. So I want to give you a big thank you and just praise you for all what you've done and to try and keep the hospital as safe as possible. But however, as we try to get back to some sort of normality, you know, whatever that's going to be, we would really like to urge people to attend hospital if they feel that they really need treatment. So please don't delay that. If there are any possible danger signs, please go to A&E, and, you know, rather than having problems later.
So, to finish, we'd like to remind members that as governors, we represent you. So please do get in touch with your questions, your challenges, even your expressions of support for the Trust. And you can do this by contacting us in the ways shown in the pack on the website. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks very much indeed, Pauline and David. So obviously governors are a voluntary role, and as chairman, I want to thank all our governors for the contribution they make to this organisation. So thank you very much for an excellent presentation, much appreciated. We have one more thing to do before we come to the close of the formal part of the annual general meeting and annual members meeting, and indeed then hear from Deborah and see the video that's been produced of the work we've done. So that is to deal with questions that we have received. We've received 4 questions, 2 of which will be answered by our chief nurse, Karen Dauber, who's in the room. So I'll maybe ask Karen to come down towards the microphone in a moment. And then Brian Gill will answer the questions 3 and 4. So I'll come and read out the question that's been received and then invite the particular clinical director to come and offer an answer, please. And can I say thank you for the questions that have come, and can I make clear that we welcome further questions. We recognise we're in a very different situation this particular year. So should you wish to put questions into the Trust, it can be done with the corporate governance email that's on the Trust website and links to the to this AGM, and we will happily answer those questions for you and make those questions and answers available to the public. So we do welcome questions, but we have 4 received that we will deal with right now. Okay. So our first 2 questions are will be answered by our chief nurse. I'll start with the first, invite Karen to respond, and then come back with the second question. So the first question is from a Shipley constituent, Lynn Joyce. Thank you, Lynn. My question in advance: what measures are in place to thoroughly check the living arrangements of patients due for discharge, and in the case of those who live alone, to liaise with other services to ensure safe aftercare? Note, I do have some experience that leads me to believe that there are no such arrangements in place, and that staff may indeed lie in order to discharge patients. So clearly I'm asking the question faithfully in the way it was received. Karen, bring you in.
Thank you, Max. I'm Karen Dorber, Chief Nurse. So in response to that question, it's difficult because I wouldn't expect any of our staff to be untruthful in any of the responses that they give, but also with the limited information that is available, it's hard to answer any specifics. But I would urge Lynn, if she wants to get in touch with me or via the PALS team, I can certainly look into the specifics of that concern raised. What I would say is that we have incredibly robust discharge arrangements, especially for our more complex patients. That includes a discharge to assess model where people go into people's houses and support them post-discharge. We've also had those services looked at by external people, and again, they rate extremely highly. We see very few complaints about our complex discharges again, so I would urge this lady to get in touch with more information if at all possible, please.
Thank you, Thank you very much, Karen. And our question number 2 comes from a constituent from Bradford South, Rachel Chapman. Thank you for your question, Rachel. I would like to ask a question about maternity services at BRI. I am due to have my baby this month and feel the services provided with regards to partners attending scans, appointments and after-birth wards is having an impact on mental health for a lot of families. I don't understand why, if my husband can be with me in active labour wearing a mask, he can't be with me for the whole of my labour and come to after-birth wards if he is wearing a mask as we live together. Now, most other hospitals in the areas, according to Rachel, surrounding Bradford, have now lifted restrictions on maternity services, allowing partners to scans and appointments and allowing at least a 1-hour slot per day for partners so they can see the baby if required to stay in hospital. Why has Bradford not lifted restrictions on visiting maternity services when the hospital is not overwhelmed with inpatients for COVID-19? When will Bradford Trust lift these restrictions on maternity service and visiting? And again, I'll invite Karen to respond to that.
Thank you, Max, and thank you for the question. So visiting throughout this period of COVID has been extremely emotional and stressful for everybody involved because as a hospital, as a nurse, we want to make sure that people are involved with the care, and that involves delivering holistic care, which involves families to do that. In particular response to maternity, all the trusts in the West Yorkshire region have worked together since March in the rules around visiting. And we wanted to make sure that we were balancing the well-being of mums, which is the beautiful experience that is having a baby, with the safety of our staff and the babies and the mums involved. And we took a very difficult decision in line with national guidance to actually stop visiting, apart from at the time of active labour with one birth partner. Unfortunately, as of today, those are still the rules here at Bradford Teaching Hospital. Some of the West Yorkshire trusts have moved away slightly from that, but have still not reinstigated visiting across the whole, as was pre-COVID. But let me just confirm why we've done that. We know that in Bradford, we are still an area of concern. We still, even though the hospital isn't seeing the levels of infection that we were seeing a couple of months ago, we know that in our community, COVID is rising and continues to be significantly higher from other areas of the country. So for that reason, we not further lifted visiting arrangements within maternity. We do, though, monitor this on a weekly basis. We look at the infection rates within our community, and we have a next stage of visiting to bring in when our infection rates as a city reduce. So please be assured that we take this extremely seriously. It's a beautiful time in somebody's life, and when people have a baby, and we want that to be special, and we want people to spend time with the families. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks very much, Karen. And of course, we wish you well, Rachel, when you come to join us. And we sincerely wish you safe care for you and your forthcoming baby. Wonderful. Our Chief Medical Officer has now joined us to answer the final two questions received from members of the public. Question 3 is from Carol Miles, who's emailed to us. My question is COVID-19 related. During the height of the virus, were the elderly and people who were shielding given the same care when being admitted with COVID-19 as a younger, stronger patient? If so, what statistics do you have that show care given, recovery times and patient ages? Thank you, Carol, and Brian, I'll bring you in. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, my name is Brian Gill. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of the Trust. In response to that question, I can absolutely assure any member of the public that all patients are treated equally regardless of their background. We clearly make judgments about the needs of patients based on their underlying conditions, any preceding clinical problems that they have, and conversations with both the patients and their families. It's really important that all the population feels really confident that anybody who comes to Bradford Teaching Hospitals is treated in their best interest. We don't collect information on specifics about individual patients to the level the question is asked, and that's because we know we treat people equally, and therefore we don't feel the need to go into that level of detail.
Thank you, Brian. And then the final question received is from a Bradford East constituent, Mashoud Haq. Thank you for your question, Mashoud. And I read it exactly as received. Am I allowed to ask how many patients died of COVID-19 in Bradford with an ethnic breakdown? I think indeed you are allowed to ask that, Mashoud. I hope our Chief Medical Officer will have some information regarding that for you.
Thank you. A really important question not just for Bradford, but also for the whole of England and the UK. So in terms of our data, what it shows is that approximately 25% of the patients who sadly died were from a Black and ethnic minority group, which is lower than the population, obviously, within Bradford that we serve. Importantly, our overall number of patients who died compared to those who had a positive COVID test is in the region of 18%, which is significantly lower than the UK average number of deaths. Clearly, we're not out of the COVID pandemic as yet, and therefore we need to monitor this over the next few months, depending on whether we get a second wave. And we have been monitoring this since day one. We've been providing the same level of care to all the population as I responded to the previous question. If any member of the public requires any further information, I'm sure we'll be able to provide that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Well, that closes the formal part of our annual general and annual members meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. But it only gets better from now, because we're about to hear from Dr. Deborah Horner, who is an intensive care consultant here at Bradford and one of our deputy operational medical directors. Deborah's played a key role in the COVID-19 response here at this hospital trust, and we look forward to hearing our keynote presentation, which is entitled Critical Care Without Walls, Our Clinical Response to COVID-19. So Deborah, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak at the meeting today.
going to work out how I move on my slides. There we are. So, yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak. What I'm going to do is try and spend the next 20 minutes or so talking about our COVID-19 journey in the hospital over the last 6 months or so. And I'm going to do that from the perspective of being an intensive care consultant on the shop floor, but also as the clinical lead for the clinical reference group Silver, which was part of the group in the hospital that was fundamental in the planning for the COVID response. So we'll talk a little bit about the planning that we did, what then happened when COVID arrived, and where we are now. So firstly, I think we realised early on that Bradford was going to be hit hard with COVID, and that was because we could see lots of reports coming in, both nationally and internationally, that was showing that Black and ethnic minority patients were disproportionately affected by COVID, and we knew that that was going to therefore reflect on our population in Bradford. Not only that, we also knew that we had a higher incidence of comorbidity, so underlying health problems within the population, and that those were also associated with more complications with COVID-19. And we also knew that we had a lot of our population living in multiple occupancy housing, and the early reports and the things that have come out since then have shown that COVID particularly spreads within families in close quarters in houses. So we knew that we needed to prepare well for COVID, because whatever happened in the country, we were definitely going to be one of the worst hit areas. And because we started to plan early. Now, it wasn't just frontline staff, it was everyone, and it wasn't just clinical, it was non-clinical as well. And I think one of the things that's come out of this is it was that total response by the hospital that meant that we were so successful in our COVID response. And I'll come on to how successful we were towards the end of the presentation. We recognised that we needed to have time to plan and also test our plans before the first big wave of COVID arrived. And we needed to make some difficult decisions within the trust about reducing down our elective theatre activity, make sure that the staff who we were going to be reallocating to different areas had the time to train and also to get into looking after patients on ICU and in areas where they don't normally work. That was a difficult decision to make, but I think we made it exactly the right time so that we had the opportunity to get those staff trained up in the areas that they needed to get experience in. In terms of hospital teams, A&E were very quick off the mark in terms of getting the whole department ready so that they could deal with both COVID and non-COVID patients within the department. They also were the front runners in terms of setting up the pathways within the hospital. So if COVID patients came in, what levels of treatment did they require? Did they need just oxygen? Did they need tight-fitting CPAP face masks that you might have seen in the press? Or did they actually need to go onto a ventilator in intensive care? So that was all happening in A&E. The acute medics, respiratory teams and elderly were all busy reconfiguring how the wards were going to work and how they were going to look after patients. Because one of the things that we were saying in critical care was we were likely to get overwhelmed with patients that needed to go onto a ventilator, and we needed the support of those other specialties to look after patients that would normally come to ICU in a ward-based environment. And we planned for that by creating this process of critical care without walls. So we had roving intensive care teams in the hospital with physiotherapists to support our colleagues in the ward areas to look after these patients safely. From a critical care perspective, I'll come on to some of the things that we did there later on, but we knew that we were going to have issues around equipment, and that wasn't because of the hospital, that was because of a lot of the national and international shortages, which you will all have seen in the press. In terms of everybody else, we had all sorts of specialties working differently and people in clinical and non-clinical areas. So whether that was administrative staff training to be on the doors in the hospital and checking ID badges,
to surgeons working differently, looking after patients in different specialties. We had proning teams of radiologists, so proning is turning patients over on ICU. Everybody chipped in, which was fantastic to see. So while all of this frontline preparation was going on, what we also needed was a command structure, and that was put in early. Initially, a lot of the work was going through a tactical silver group, which was looking at how the sort of day-to-day things were going to be working tactically within the hospital. But it became clear very early on that although we had a gold silver command that was chaired by Brian Gill, our medical director, we needed to have a kind of daily huddle, if you like, with the clinicians across the shop floor so that we could make those kind of quick decisions that needed to be made on a daily basis to really update everybody on what was happening, and also all of the information that was coming in nationally and internationally from research so that we could implement changes fast to give the best care for our patients. From a planning perspective, there were lots of people involved, but infection prevention control were absolutely key. So whether that was teaching staff how to use PPE, teaching patients how to use PPE, it was also making sure that every single area in the hospital was safe from a COVID perspective, whether that's clinical or non-clinical. Care pathways I've already touched on, but we needed to make sure that those were joined up. So it wasn't just about specific areas working in isolation, it was how did they all fit together. And it became clear that palliative care were going to be very involved in this process, whether that was looking after individuals on a ward or looking after whole ward areas. They were very involved and also involved in visiting, which again I'll come on to later on. From a critical care perspective, from an equipment point of view, I've touched on the fact that equipment was an issue. We did need to think early about what we were going to do with equipment, and we also needed to think laterally. And the reason I bring it up here is that states, clinical engineering and decontamination were all absolutely key in that, and working together perhaps in ways that we hadn't done before, and knowing who in the organisation we needed to get in touch with so that we could do things as best we could to serve our patients. So on the left, you can see our beautiful new intensive care. So we've got great big rooms with frosted glass that changes from clear to fogged, depending on whether you need to see into the room or not. And on the right, you can see my colleague, Dr. Quinn, in his full PPE on our old intensive care unit, which was Ward 10 in the hospital. So we had our lovely sparkling new intensive care unit with 16 beds and 2 individual side rooms with negative pressure that are ideal for dealing with patients with airborne infections. Now that is better than most places, but clearly when you've got a whole pandemic coming at you, it's not going to be enough just to have 2 beds. So fortunately, Ward 10 hadn't yet been repurposed and was being used as a bed store when we first heard about COVID coming our way. So we rapidly undertook some work to transform it back into a 12-bedded ICU, and also the plans around the staffing for that, as well as I mentioned before, theatre staff, ward staff who rapidly got trained up to be supported, working in pods with ICU nurses to look after the patients that were coming in. At the time, the Nightingale hospitals didn't exist, so we didn't know how many patients we were going to have to deal with, and we didn't know whether an additional 12 beds was going to be enough. So we also had Plan C, which was Ward 14, which would apparently most of us didn't know that it had been set up as a backup ICU, I think in the Gulf War, but we had that there as a facility with all the right gases and things that we needed to treat an ICU patient. So we had that as our Plan C. Fortunately, we never got to the point where we needed to use Ward 14 because the Nightingales came online, and had we needed to transfer any patients, that's where they would have gone. So we managed with our 2 ICU units. So once we've got all of these plans together, we know from lots of areas of medicine, it's really important to test out your plans. And I've got a little clip here, which just highlights why it's not about the clinical things, it's about the whole environment. It's the teams working together, but it's also how you then work together to make sure that everything's going according to plan. I'm just struggling a bit getting my video to go.
main screen. Next one.
Guys, it's this way, but there's building work going on.
Right, that's fine then. Don't pretend, don't
That's an
panic.
issue.
It's only a dummy.
No, because it's so that's a problem. Okay, so it's a very brief video. I haven't actually showed you the main clinical bit of it because actually that wasn't the main thing that we learned. Actually, we were all fine at the clinical bit. What we did learn was that we couldn't get out of the unit the way we wanted to. And so we were effectively then trying to take a COVID patient through a crowded waiting room, which obviously wasn't the right thing to be doing. And that we needed to look at the footprint of the organisation and hurry up the work that was going on the floor so that we knew that we could safely move the patients around the hospital. So, yeah, it was those kind of things that we picked up. And there were several kind of other kind of curveballs that came our way through doing this simulation. The other thing that was great was that it wasn't, again, about individual teams. You can see there were quite a lot of people in the full PPE there. We had members of the team from A&E, radiology, critical care, anaesthetics, all involved in those simulations. And it was about everyone working together to make sure that we gave the best care for our patients. So we did all this preparation, and literally as we were finishing our preparation, patients started to come in. So COVID really hit us in the hospital in a week around Easter. We put lots of plans in place, so we had far more staff than you would normally have here on an Easter weekend. And I put this up because you can see that the second graph down on the left, so that the blue bars, you can see how rapidly the number of inpatients increased in the hospital. So those are the numbers coming in per day. So at the peak, we were admitting about 25 patients a day with COVID into the hospital. And you can also see in the slide below that how many we were admitting to our intensive care unit. Now, we went pretty rapidly straight up to about 15. Bear in mind, this is just the COVID patients. So we also had non-COVID patients on our intensive care. So I think we got to within a couple of empty beds on Ward 10 in terms of our capacity at peak. The thing that's also interested on here is the non-invasive ventilation. So if you look at the bottom right graph, those are the patients that we would usually have on intensive care, but we trained up the ward staff to look after with the tight-fitting CPAP oxygen masks. And so at peak, we had about 35 of those patients on the wards as well. So if you add all that together, our critical care patients, we had 59 in the hospital at one time, and that's 360% occupancy. Now, on the shop floor, I was on that weekend. It actually felt fine. It felt under control. But it was only because of the team working. Because if that suddenly our ICU was 360% full, it would not normally feel calm at all. So again, all the preparation really paid off. Curveballs. So I mentioned before that we had to sort of change things that we needed to do. One of them obviously was making sure there weren't holes in the ground so you could get the patients to ICU. Equipment was a huge curveball, and most of these were not of our own doing. These were things that were national, international shortages that we needed to think laterally and quickly to make sure that our patients were safe. So one of the first things from an equipment point of view is ventilators. Now, you will all have seen stuff on the news around shortages of ventilators. But at the beginning, there hadn't really been all of those reports. We just had a feeling that it was going to be a problem. And I remember calling Sandra Shannon and just saying, we just need to order some ventilators, can we please do it? And we did on that day, and we ordered 12. Italy ordered 40,000 ventilators from that company on the same day. So had we not done it that day, we would have made do because we had plans B and C with theatre ventilation and other things, but they wouldn't have been as good. So it was those kind of decisions that really sort of were key. PPE, again, that was all over the news. What we realised quite quickly was we had to be as independent as we could be from national supply chains, because we knew that there were likely to be problems. There had been in other countries, and there were starting to be issues in the UK. So one of my colleagues, Dr. Lawson, you can see modelling one of our lovely CPAP masks, and a couple of other colleagues had worked out that the filters in industrial masks were of the same quality as the ones that were in the FFP3 pipe fitting masks, and got in touch with someone from an industrial estate in Heathrow who had a big stock of these masks, which he used for, I think, asbestos removal, which for some reason, and I still don't know why, he had been dunking in alcohol every day for 18 months to see whether they would perish. I mean, who knew that that was something that somebody would do? Anyway, we then had a supply of masks that didn't come from a medical supplier, which hadn't yet been tapped into by anybody else, and a way of cleaning them. The next issue was, where do we get the alcohol from? Because everybody was trying to make hand gel. So it was very difficult to get a hold of medical grade alcohol. But luckily, one of the local gin distillers and then the university managed to supply us with the alcohol, and our decontamination team managed to transform from cleaning scopes through steam and other ways of cleaning into dunking masks and PPE into alcohol to give us a continuous supply of PPE. It wasn't just the masks. We had ways of cleaning single-use gowns with chlorine. We had a community whip round of steam sterilisers for baby products that we thought that we could probably clean visors in. Now, neither of those latter things we needed to use, but we had them all there as a backup because we didn't want to be in a position where we didn't have any PPE. And because of all of that, and because we reduced the requirement of PPE within the hospital, we never ran out. We know that other places did, because you'll have seen it on the news. So oxygen, again, that also hit the news. So two issues. One is, do you have enough at all in your hospital to give oxygen to the however many patients we had, 50 plus patients that all turned up at once? And how big are the pipes that go to your ward? Not normally questions that trouble you at night, but suddenly became a big issue in hospital when we weren't sure whether we were going to have oxygen within the storage or even being able to be delivered by companies nationally. We had to move patients across the ward, so we had plans for just having 2 wards with all of our COVID patients on, and we very rapidly needed to spread them more widely because we realised that the diameter of the pipes was insufficient to provide as much oxygen as we wanted for those areas. The other thing we did, and again, that's why I've got my colleague, Dr. Lawton, modelling this mask, was Dr. Lawton realised that there was a whole load of community machines that delivered a high pressure to patients who've got a condition called sleep apnea. Now, no one could get hold of the CPAP machines for in hospitals. They'd already all gone out straight away to countries that had been hit with COVID first. But he phoned up our local supplier and said, yeah, we've got 2,000. How many do you want? Brilliant, that's great. And he also worked out that you could not only use those machines, but you could put oxygen into those machines to supplement how much oxygen patients were getting. And it used 10 times less oxygen than a standard hospital machine. So not only did we then have the kit, but we also solved the problem of the oxygen. So we got into the swing of it. We had a long and sustained first wave, but as we got used to dealing with COVID patients, our pathways became more established into red pathways for patients who had COVID, green pathways for patients that didn't. Our testing became quicker, it became more efficient. We had fantastic engagement from the lab and managed to test our patients and get the results back quickly so that we could make sure that we kept everyone in the hospital safe and minimise transmission within hospital. Visiting, that was a real success. And I know we've already talked about it, but actually Karen Dorber was an absolute champion for visiting within COVID. And we went further with COVID visiting than most other places and certainly led the way across Yorkshire and Harrogate, Yorkshire, Harrogate and the wider patch. With respect to visiting. So we were managing to facilitate end-of-life visiting as quickly as we could, and quicker than I think anywhere else in the region. And certainly what we were doing for visitors was then being used as a template for others. That was really helped by fantastic facilitation by the paediatric team and the palliative care team in terms of bringing families in, because it's a difficult situation to come into, distressing for the staff, for the patients, and also getting used to wearing the PPE, because you have to make sure that those relatives were safe when they visited. So without the support of those other specialties, we would have found it much more difficult to facilitate. In terms of where we are now, so we're starting to get things going again within the hospital, which is great. And one of the things that I think we're all keen to build on is the huge amount of clinical engagement that we had across this period of COVID, and using that clinical engagement to get the hospital going again and working differently in the future. It's been a real opportunity to see how we can do things differently, having stopped a lot of services for a period of time. So what did we do differently? I've already mentioned critical care without walls. Without that, we would have been completely overrun, and we definitely would have been transferring patients out to other hospitals or to the Nightingales once they were established. We were constantly watching the evidence coming out nationally and internationally, and we introduced early CPAP, these tight-fitting face masks to patients when perhaps other units were doing it a little bit later. We also introduced this idea of proning, or tummy time as it became known on the wards, which was lying on your tummy, because that meant that you could ventilate different bits of your lungs while resting others. And we found early on that that was really helping to improve oxygen getting into the body. We also started to thin patients' blood early, because we recognised that this wasn't just a disease of the breathing system, it was actually an inflammatory condition, and it was a clotting condition. We also wanted to make sure when we were doing all of these things that we were engaging as far as possible with national and international research, and a lot of our patients in the hospital got involved in that research, which was hugely useful, and it has really kind of provided information nationally and internationally about what we should do. And dexamethasone, one of the medicines you will have heard about on the news, a lot of the patients who were put into that trial came from Bradford. So that's great. And we're really looking at research going forward as well in terms of vaccination and all the other things that are still ongoing with COVID. So outcomes, that's also been mentioned earlier in one of the questions. So we started with a population, as I said, who we knew were at higher risk. And one of the reasons patients were at higher risk was because of this increased incidence of comorbidity, so underlying health problems, which mean that COVID is more dangerous. And if you look at the table 1 on there, you can see that in some cases those comorbidities were double the rate that you would see as the national average. This data is from a paper that was published by one of our consultants with some of the critical care team and teams from other areas of the hospital, and it's comparing our information with ISARIC, and ISARIC is an international database of intensive care patients. The key thing I wanted to point out here is from table 2, which is that our hospital mortality was 33.3% as opposed to 38.6%. Now, it doesn't feel a lot, but actually it's about 14% lower in Bradford, with the background of patients that were sicker anyway. So you'd expect it actually, our mortality would likely be higher. It was actually lower. And if you look at the absolute numbers of that, so it's 559 patients, that's 29 patients who survived in Bradford that you wouldn't have expected to have survived given those national and international figures. That's a huge achievement. So all those things we did and all that work we put in translated into more patients surviving from COVID. So that's our take on it, but actually it's about the patients, and that's what tonight is about, and engagement with our population. Throughout COVID, Professor John Wright, who's an epidemiologist who works in Bradford, recorded a series of programmes for BBC Radio 4 called NHS Frontline. And the recording I'm about to play is of a patient called Mohammed, who was in an induced coma on intensive care on a ventilator for several weeks following his admission with COVID. Fortunately, he's survived and he's home and doing very well, and he continues to champion the care that we are providing for patients in Bradford, and he's done a lot with the media. You might have seen some of the articles in some of the papers as well. So I'll just try and play that. See if I can do it.
I had no other recollection, and then I recall coming round and everybody reacting to it. The nurses saying, "Oh, it's good to see you, good to speak to you. We've been looking after you." The doctors coming and saying hi. Again, there was some paranoia to begin with. I thought these people trying to trick me.
Because you don't remember being intubated or
No,
coming to ICU at all, do you?
I don't remember being incubated at all.
So you just woke up and suddenly you're in this strange environment.
Yeah, and then I'm being told things. And I'm telling myself, that's not right. If that's not right, then they're obviously trying to pull a fast one. What's going on? What's all this about? And then more and more kind of started to make sense. Just absolutely amazing people. You know, not just in relation to the care, to the patients, but also to the commitment to their colleagues. So that a lot of the people who have been working on the ICU on this corona virus thing, you know, many of them are not ICU nurses. And then you start realizing how much the people in the ICU have done, you know, day and night. Words can't demonstrate what I feel.
That's it for me. So I just want to say thank you to every member of staff. I'm sure there are some people that I haven't mentioned who were involved in this, but it's been a roller coaster, both professionally and emotionally. But I think I'm just incredibly proud of the whole organisation for its response, and I think that's borne out in how well our patients have done, and patients like Mohammed and the things that they say about us. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Deborah. Fascinating insight, brilliant presentation. So very much appreciated. Thanks very much indeed. And thank you for your leadership. That's you and your colleagues. It's been quite clear throughout this period. So many thanks from me as chairman. Yeah, terrific. Okay, so we're going to move on now to our final part of the event, which is a video that's been produced. I think this runs for 10 or 15 minutes. And so our colleagues have got together and captured some of the things that have been going on under the headline banner of "Still Here for You, Caring for Bradford in a Pandemic." So we'll watch this video and then I will close the event proper as we close, and thank you for your attendance. I do hope very much that you enjoy this. So here's the video, "Still Here for You, Caring for Bradford in a Pandemic."
So this is how you will see us on the ward, and you'll see us in gloves, visors and aprons.
They have special outfits to wear like superheroes, and this is what they look like.
Face masks or face coverings must now be worn by all visitors coming to hospital and patients coming to hospital for planned or outpatient care.
COVID testing is now routine for all patients attending an inpatient procedure in our hospitals.
And I've got here one of our patients called Mr. Najat. He was here for the last 4 days. He was needing a non-invasive ventilation. He's got the coronavirus, and I'm very pleased to say he's recovering very well.
Everyone lost hope in me, and they were about to turn the machines off, and I wouldn't be here today. But through the fight, through the struggle, I woke up at the end. The hospital is welcoming you, man. That's the only safest place in the world. And trust me, they look after you like better than family would.
I stay positive. I know people were praying for me. Thank you for keeping me alive.
We're still encouraging our BAME colleagues to be risk assessed.
Line managers have put into place individual plans for colleagues to come back to work safely.
We've adapted as an organisation incredibly well, and everybody's done a fantastic job keeping ourselves, our staff and our patients safe.
The listening service is available to all staff at Bradford teaching hospitals. We're here to listen to anything that you're concerned about without judgment.
We Can Talk is a mental health training package that we can do online by members of staff. Absolutely anyone that comes into contact with children and young people within the acute trust who might have come in a mental health crisis.
Sadly, we must now restrict visiting further, even for patients at the end of their life.
We recognise that people cannot visit their loved ones in hospitals, so we wanted to be able to relay information about inpatients to family members who may be concerned about their well-being.
There's also the Thinking of You service, which means that you can send videos, messages or photos that will then go to your loved one.
I wanted to get involved in the PPE hub, which is what I'm doing now, and I'm going out, we're making sure that there are adequate deliveries to areas.
I wanted to do something practical. I wanted to actually do something that felt for me like I was giving a bit more into this. That job is that of an healthcare assistant. It is doing the stuff that has to be done to make sure patients are safe and well looked after.
For my patient group, it's been really successful, and I've done over 200 video consultations now. I think patients like it because it's really safe. They can stay in their own home and have a consultation.
So we're very excited this week because we're launching our new People First, Digital First website. What it means is it allows people to understand how we will provide first-class healthcare to them.
The Command Centre is the first of its kind in Europe. What the Command Centre does is it tracks and monitors every facet of the patient's journey while they're at the hospital.
We want this message to assure you that we are here for your children 24 hours a day, every day.
We all know that we're operating in strange and confusing times at the moment, but we'd like to reassure you that accident and emergency is still open.
We're doing everything we can to ensure your pregnancy and birth will go as smoothly as possible, and we want you to feel confident that you can come to us with any concerns whatsoever.
A member of staff will wait for you at the car parking bay.
Can you just give me your name, your date of birth and your address, please?
Personally, I'm exceptionally proud of their efforts to make this hospital safe during the COVID crisis.
The Centre will help people across the region to take part in important clinical research.
15 years ago, our research team was 3 strong. Today, we have the world-beating Bradford Institute for Health Research, the Wolfson Centre for Applied Health Research. We have over 200 researchers working out how we can improve the health of the city.
We've been part of 2 big platform trials for COVID-19.
One of them is called the Recovery Trial, and the other one is called the REMAP-CAP trial. We are very keen that all of our COVID-19 patients in Bradford, including those from ethnic minorities, take part in these studies, not only for their own good, but for the good of the next wave of patients we're likely to see from the infection.
The maternity research team are working on 2 studies, UCOS and Pan-COVID, which are both urgent public health studies that are investigating the effects of COVID-19 on pregnancy.
I'm working on the Israq Who study for Public Health England. This will help them identify how the pathogen is being transmitted and what treatments are working.
The genomic study is a national study. It's looking at why some people end up more poorly than others, why for some people they can get better at home, other people end up admitted to hospital.
We are going to be launching a microsite partnering with the University of Bradford so that people within Bradford can also sign up on the microsite to take part in our vaccine trials running in Bradford.
Everyone has been very lovely and very generous, just really brilliant. And I hope we're able to sort of capture that, you know, the sort of the human element that exists here. I can't thank the people that have been helping us enough.
You, our community, have raised nearly £250,000.
I'm a physiotherapist working in critical care, and we've been really lucky to have a donation from the Bradford Sikh community that has enabled us to purchase one of these Sara Convalizer chairs for our intensive care unit.
Our main aim in the home-based team is for home-based to feel the same as they always have done, which is a really personal, private and positive experience.
Breast screening is starting up again, so please tell your friends it's okay to come, it's safe, and we really want to see you.
What we found very early on is that patients were getting a multitude of symptoms. Some were getting lung disease, but a lot were getting problems with fatigue, concentration, even psychological problems.
I was given a lot of ideas for how I could help relieve some of my symptoms. I've been doing that since, and it really has worked. It's just amazing to feel finally that someone's helping you through this.
Wow, we're all very proud to do the very best we can for the people of Bradford. So thank you to the medical illustration team who produced that, and it makes you feel extremely proud. Thank you. So thanks everybody for joining us. I can see that there has been a number of viewers during the course of the live stream, so thank you for joining us. The recording of this whole event will be on the website, so I would encourage you to look at that, and of course try and get people to see that video. Let's tell people how we are really, truly a good organisation here in Bradford. I finished with a note to our partners, actually, in providing good health and care to people of the Bradford area. By necessity, of course, an AGM and an annual members meeting focuses on the specific contribution that we make as an acute trust But, you know, please be aware that we share with you the ambition that people in Bradford should be happy, healthy, and at home. And we will do everything we can to contribute to that shared vision for the people of Bradford. As we move into outstanding services, they will be closer to people's home. And that's where we'll see outstanding clinicians rising to the fore here in Bradford. So happy, healthy at home continues to be our mantra. And I finish by reminding all people who are able to see this and who contribute to anything we do here in Bradford, that we will always be driven by those three simple values that we have. We care, we value people, and we are one team. They will continue to drive us as we go into the coming year. We care, we value people, and we are one team. Thank you very much for joining us. That closes the event.